Hi, everybody. Some love stories don't end when everything falls apart. They begin there. The journey of Toan and Lytudiep is one of rebuilding, piece by fragile piece, a love shattered by lost memories and unspoken pain. What was once familiar became distant, and what was once certain had to be chosen all over again. As Toan struggles to reclaim the past, Lytudiep walks beside him, carrying both hope and heartbreak. Every step forward is uncertain, every moment together a test of faith. Yet, in the ruins of what they lost, a deeper love quietly takes shape, one born not from memory, but from courage and devotion. Because when love is broken, the journey to rebuild it reveals how strong it truly is. There are moments in life when everything familiar suddenly becomes strange. For Toan, that moment came on a quiet morning in a hospital room, filled with the steady sound of machines and the pale light of dawn. When he opened his eyes, the world felt clean and empty, like a page waiting for words that refused to return. Faces hovered above him, voices called his name, yet none of them belonged to his heart. Among those faces stood Lytudiep, holding her breath, holding back tears, holding on to hope with trembling hands. Toan looked at her politely, almost kindly, the way one looks at a stranger who means no harm. That single glance shattered something inside her. The man she had loved for years, the man whose laughter once filled their small home, now saw her as nothing more than a name on someone else's lips. In that moment, Lytudiep understood a cruel truth of life. Memory can disappear in an instant, but pain arrives without warning and stays. The days that followed moved slowly, like time itself was unsure how to continue. Every morning, Lytudiep returned to the hospital with fresh clothes, warm soup, and stories Toan no longer remembered. She spoke of rainy evenings they once shared, of simple meals, of dreams whispered in the dark. Toan listened quietly, nodding, sometimes smiling, sometimes confused. He did not remember loving her, but he felt something strange when she spoke. A gentle pressure in his chest, as if a door inside him refused to close completely. At night, when the hospital grew silent, Lytudiep sat by the window and watched the city lights flicker. She wondered how many people were out there living ordinary lives, unaware of how fragile everything truly was. Love, she realized, was not always about being remembered. Sometimes it was about choosing to stay even when nothing was returned. Doctors spoke carefully, using words like uncertain and possible. Friends suggested rest, distance, even letting go. But Lytudiep stayed, not because she was strong, but because leaving felt like losing him all over again. In the quiet rhythm of hospital days, a question slowly formed, soft but persistent. If love could survive without memory, then perhaps this was only the beginning of their journey, not the end. Every love story has a beginning, but few are forced to begin again. For Lytudiep, each day beside Toan felt like walking through familiar streets in a city that no longer recognized her. The hospital became their world. White walls, quiet footsteps, and the slow rhythm of healing that never followed a straight line. Toan woke each morning with the same question in his eyes. Who am I, and why does this woman care so much? Lytudiep stopped trying to explain everything at once. Instead, she learned to love him in fragments. She learned to smile without expecting recognition, to speak without waiting for memories to return. She told him small things, how he liked his tea slightly bitter, how he used to hum while reading the news, how he once promised her they would grow old slowly, together. Toan listened, sometimes amused, sometimes thoughtful, as if these stories belonged to another man who shared his name. Outside the hospital, life went on as usual. Nurses complained about long shifts, families argued in hushed voices, and the cafeteria ran out of coffee every afternoon. These ordinary scenes made Lytudiep ache. She wondered how many couples walked past each other every day, unaware of how precious remembering truly was. Watching Toan struggle to recall his own past taught her that memory was not just about the mind, it was about the quiet moments we take for granted. There were days of hope. One afternoon, Tuan suddenly laughed at a joke she told, a familiar laugh that echoed something deep inside her chest. For a second, she saw the man she loved. But the moment passed quickly, leaving behind silence and confusion. Other days were heavier. Tuan grew frustrated, angry at his own emptiness, pushing her away with words he didn't fully mean. Lytudiep learned to accept those days too, understanding that healing often hurts before it helps. At night, when the city lights blurred into distant stars, Lytudiep held Tuan's hand and spoke softly about tomorrow. She did not know if he would ever remember their past, but she began to wonder if that mattered as much as she once thought. Perhaps love was not about holding on to what was lost, but about patiently building something new. One shared breath, one quiet moment, one fragile hope at a time. Some mornings begin loudly, with urgent footsteps and restless thoughts. Others arrive quietly, like a whisper you almost miss. For Toan, that morning began with a feeling he could not name. He woke before Lytudiep, staring at the pale sunlight slipping through the hospital curtains, his heart beating faster for no clear reason. Something inside him felt familiar, as if a long-closed door had shifted ever so slightly. Lytudiep noticed it immediately. There was a change in his eyes, subtle but real. He looked at the room longer than usual, tracing the edges of objects as if searching for hidden meanings. When she asked how he felt, he didn't answer right away. Instead, he said something unexpected. "I've seen this light before." Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't dare ask more. Hope, she had learned, was fragile. They left the hospital that afternoon for a short walk, doctor-approved and carefully timed. Outside, life moved in its ordinary rhythm. A street vendor called out to passersby. A child tugged at her mother's sleeve. Somewhere, a radio played an old love song, cracked with static. Toan stopped walking. The melody pulled at him like an invisible thread, stirring something deep and unsettled. His head ached, but his heart felt strangely warm. Fragments came without warning. A hand reaching for his, rain tapping against a window, a woman laughing softly while cooking dinner. Toan pressed his temples, torn between pain and longing. Lytudiep stood beside him, her hands trembling, unsure whether to hold him or step back. She realized then that memories do not return like a flood. They come like shy guests, testing whether they are welcome. That evening, Toan asked her to tell him a story, not about his illness, not about the future, but about them. Lytudiep spoke slowly, choosing her words like precious stones. She told him about their first argument, about how he hated being wrong, and how she hated giving up. Toan smiled faintly. "That sounds like me," he said. The smile nearly broke her. Yet doubt lingered in the quiet spaces between them. What if the memories returned only halfway? What if love, once rebuilt, felt different from before? As night fell, Lytudiep looked out at the city lights and understood something painful and beautiful at once. Even if the past found its way back, it would never be exactly the same. But maybe love didn't need perfection. Maybe it only needed courage to remember to forget, and to choose each other again, every single day. Some moments arrive without warning, yet change everything. That morning, the sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that made the world feel suspended between rain and light. Lytudiep sat beside Toan's bed, peeling an apple slowly, her movements calm, though her heart was not. She had learned to live in uncertainty. But that day, uncertainty was about to break. Toan watched her hands, the way she always cut the apple into even slices, the small scar on her finger. Suddenly, his chest tightened. The image of those same hands appeared in his mind, holding an umbrella in the rain, gripping hospital forms, wiping tears she thought he never saw. His breath hitched. A name rose from somewhere deep and undeniable. Diem. The knife slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the floor. She froze, afraid that if she moved, the moment would disappear. When she looked up, his eyes were wet, filled with recognition and regret all at once. Memories crashed into him, not gently this time. The love, the promises, the pain of losing himself and leaving her alone to fight for them both. He remembered everything. Tears came, uncontrolled and raw. Toan reached for her, apologizing again and again, his voice breaking. Lytudiep cried too, but hers were tears of release. Months of fear, patience, and silent hope poured out in that embrace. In that ordinary hospital room, surrounded by beeping machines and faded walls, love felt louder than any grand ceremony. But remembering was only the beginning. When Toan was discharged, life did not suddenly become perfect. They faced whispers from others, financial burdens, and the quiet question neither dared to ask: could they truly return to what they once were? One evening, as they shared a simple meal at home, Toan took her hand. There was no dramatic speech, no ring, only honesty. "Let's not go back," he said softly. "Let's start again." In that moment, Lytudiep understood something deeper than memory. Love was not built on what was remembered, but on what was chosen. Chosen in hospital hallways, chosen in debt and doubt, chosen in everyday life, cooking, waiting, forgiving. Outside, rain finally began to fall. Inside, they sat together in silence, not needing words. The journey that shattered them had also reshaped them. And as the future quietly opened before them, one truth remained clear. Even when memory fails, love, when patiently held, can find its way home.